WG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's 23 minutes past the hour of 9 p.m. that I do come to you live from the streets of Kampala, Uganda, to once again do the extended version of the Premier League preview. I call it the extended version because we did the preliminary version in the morning hours for those of you that were part of that morning broadcast. And yeah, like I promised you, tonight we'll be focusing on what will come on Super Sunday in as far as the Premier League is concerned. So on that note, therefore, without wasting any further ado, allow us get to it. But before we do all that, allow me have audios tested and make sure everything does check out in as far as this particular broadcast is concerned. And then also, but while we are at it, I wish to send my sincere vote of thanks to every single one of you that catch broadcasts every single day, morning and evening. Then those who watch our broadcasts much later after they've ended, we do not take your love and support for granted. Then I hope you've had a wonderful day. It's been a bit of a very tiring day, I must acknowledge, given all the up and downs that I had to go through. Nonetheless, it's been a beautiful day. Did rain a bit in the evening hours. And then the other big news is that YouTube has activated translations on our channel for our broadcast. So for those of you that prefer to listen this in Espanol, in Portuguese, in maybe Mandarin, I do not know what YouTube's capabilities are, but yeah, it's called auto dubbing, being now available on the channel. Hi LFC, good to have you back. How are you doing? How is your evening? Can't stay. I'm at my youth club. Wow, you seem to be a very engaged person. One day, one moment you're doing rugby training and having a match. Another day is youth club. Another evening, it's movie nights. Yesterday you were making pizzas. You seem to be a guy that wears many hats beyond just being a Liverpool fan. But anyways, it's always a pleasure to have you around, and for whatever amount of time you do spare to be with us is always appreciated for what it is. So thank you so much for the continued love and support. Just remember to leave us a like on this broadcast, and whenever you can squeeze out a moment out of your engagement with the youth club, do not hesitate to tune in. Also, if you can give us a shout out among your fellow youth in that club, we'll really appreciate it a great deal. So unfortunately you're going to be away while we focus on Manchester City versus Liverpool on this beautiful night. So really amazing stuff. Anyways, yeah, so that's what we're going to be partaking through in as far as this broadcast is concerned. It's no longer a secret that Manchester City will be hosting Super Sunday to see out match day 11 in the last of the international break. It will be the last game of the Premier League before the international break. Of course, there will be plenty of action to come our way in as far as elsewhere in Europe is concerned, and we'll get to look at that. I must give this disclaimer. Should internet betray us on this evening, please bear with us. I'm not sure. In fact, a subscription is meant to expire today. I do not know particularly at what time, but I hope we can, if that happens, we can renew it in the course of the broadcast. So if that is the case, please bear with me for whatever it shall be in that given opportune moment. I can already see some of my feed is stumbling before we even get into the gist of this evening's conversation. So, and really, anyways, like I said, we already looked at majority of the games. In fact, all the games that will be coming your way on Saturday, we did have a look at those, and then we promised you that we'll be focusing on the games that will come tonight. So that will be coming on Super Sunday. But just to give you a recap of what the fixtures look like in as far as the Premier League's match day 11 are concerned, Tottenham Hotspur opened the account with Manchester United at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, and two games at 6 p.m. With Everton up against Fulham. West Ham will be up against Burnley. Sunderland at 8:30 p.m. Will be up against Arsenal. While Chelsea in the late kickoff on Saturday will be at home against Wolverhampton Wanderers at 11 p.m. Hi Pedri, how are you? Yes, Robert, I'm back, can't stay, I'm at a youth club. Why are you copying LFC? You say Manchester United will win. Well, my own prediction was a 1-1 draw for that one. I mean, I do not want to over contest that. It's just a matter of opinion in terms of predictions, but I understand why you would come with that school of thought, because Tottenham United want to get one over Tottenham Hotspurs following last year's defeat in the finals of the UEFA Europa League by 1-0 at San Mamés. And then also Tottenham Hotspurs have really struggled to register a home win. I remember they got beat at home against Aston Villa. They got beat at home against Bournemouth by 0-0. Then there was, I think, a draw at home. So, you know, they've had their struggles. I think they've only won one game at home in as far as the Premier League is concerned. And that should have been, I think, against Burnley. Was it against Burnley on the opening weekend? I stand to be corrected, but at least it's only been one victory. So I would understand completely as to why you would suggest that Manchester United will win that game. But it will be a difficult game. Very defensive side, very well organized at Tottenham Hotspur in comparison to what they were under Ange Postecoglou. They will play with a bit of a low block, mid block, depending on how they choose to apply themselves. So that's a game we looked at today morning. So let's skip to what's going to be happening on Super Sunday. Also, give me your predictions for Manchester City versus Liverpool. So on Super Sunday, Aston Villa will be at home at 5 p.m. against AFC Bournemouth. Brentford will be at home against Newcastle. Crystal Palace take on Brighton, while Nottingham Forest will be up against Leeds United. Kickoff at 5 p.m. East African time. That means it will be around 2 p.m. No, maybe 3 p.m. No, actually around 2 p.m. Around 2 p.m. UK time or European time as things stand. And in the late kickoff at 7:30 p.m. Manchester City, which is going to be the gist of our conversation tonight, will be up against Liverpool as we go through that. Now, speaking to the media in the pre-match press conference, he was allowing himself there and a slot saying their victories against Real Madrid and Aston Villa were because of the playing styles of those teams. They knew what to expect and they went about it the correct way, and that's why they were able to win. In comparison to teams that were parking the bus against them, I do not know, playing the long ball and things like that, But nonetheless, in any situation, as a Liverpool manager, the expectation is that you will win your games, is that you get to win those games, be it the home games, be it the away games, be it the teams against teams playing with the low block, be it against teams that play with the mid block, be it teams that rely on set pieces, whether it's corner kicks, whether it's throw-ins, whether it's winning free kicks in and around the dangerous areas. The expectation is that you should be winning those fixtures. So I wouldn't excuse Arne Slot for anything whatsoever in regards to that. It's the second place team versus the third place team on the Premier League table. Manchester City are second with 19 points, 6 behind the leaders Arsenal, and then Liverpool come third with 18 points, only a point behind Manchester City. If Liverpool win this game, they leapfrog Manchester City. If Manchester City win this game, they maintain their second place. If it ends in a draw, the status quo may not change for Manchester City and Liverpool, depend other results notwithstanding. The other results then for teams like Sunderland, Bournemouth will also determine Manchester United. I think maybe Manchester United not much, but anyway, depending on how other results go, we could have a swap of places in and around the second and third place respectively, going down below the table. Regardless of what happens with Arsenal, lose, win, draw, their position on the Premier League table will not change, at least for now. So that is a food for thought. Then in as far as how both teams have behaved in the last 5 fixtures. We're talking about recent form in the Premier League alone. Manchester City have been really brilliant. They've won 4 out of the last 5 games. Their only defeat coming against Aston Villa by 1-0, which was a slump away at Villa Park, and then they managed to beat up against FC Bournemouth in the last league outing by 3-1. Prior to the Aston Villa loss, they had beaten up against Everton by 2-0. Brought Erling Haaland on target in that one, just as he was against Bournemouth with the brace once again. He did also score in their 1-0 victory against Brentford, and then he also scored a brace in their 5-1 victory against Burnley. When you rewind things back to match day 6 of the Premier League, as far as things go. In sharp comparison or contrast, on the other side of Liverpool, they've only won 1 in their last 5, losing all the other 4, losing to Crystal Palace, Chelsea, Manchester United, and Brentford. Whilst they did win against Aston Villa, while kept a clean sheet. So the contest in itself does come at a very brilliant time for both teams. Of course, in terms of overall form, Manchester City edge it, like you've seen. When you go across all competitions, we know that Liverpool also got beat in the EFL Cup by Crystal Palace during that sort of spell by 3-0. And then Manchester City won 3-1 against Swansea. When you go to the UEFA Champions League, just this week, Liverpool beat up against Real Madrid by 0-0. Manchester City were 4-1 winners against Borussia Dortmund. So clearly you can see the form is there for both teams, just that Manchester City, like I said, do edge it out on that form table. In the Premier League, they've met at 56 times. That's Man City and Liverpool. They've been 21 draws, a whopping 21 draws. Manchester City have only had 12 victories, while Liverpool have had 23. Nonetheless, in recent times, you could say it's been that kind of game that has everything to give. Last season, Liverpool beat up against Manchester City home and away by 2-0 respectively, while the season prior to that, they did all share the spoils in a 1-1 draw across both fixtures. 1-1 at Anfield, 1-1 at the Etihad Stadium. And then you have to go back in April 2023 at the Etihad Stadium to find a Manchester City victory. So that means Man City have won once out of the last 5 fixtures, 2 victories for Liverpool, and 2 draws between the two sides. Liverpool have proved to be the stronger side. I remember, if there's any manager that gave Pep Guardiola lots and lots of headache, that was his compatriot in Jurgen Klopp. Nonetheless, Jurgen Klopp is his gone, and now it is an slot within those reigns, within that club. And I'm hoping perhaps that things can go all but the right way for both sides. So we'll have to witness that on Super Sunday at 7:30 p.m. East African time. Now, let's go into the respective teams in terms of how they could set up. I'm afraid I do not trust Pep Guardiola. And the reason as to why I particularly say that is because he's the kind of manager that can wake up on a whim and change his entire team. Now, obviously, he would have had his own reasons for making those kinds of changes, or whether you think they would be drastic or otherwise. Whatever your opinion about them would be, all I know is that he is very capable of going out there and making those kinds of changes. He's just capable of just waking up and say, yeah, the team that had beat up against Borussia Dortmund, however much Phil Foden was really incredible, he's going to sit this one out. And Ryan Cherki will start. However much Nico Gonzalez was good, no, he's not going to start. We'll play Tijan Reinders in the deep lying role. We'll play Bernardo Silva, and then Ryan Cherki ahead of them. We'll play Omar Mamouche, not Jeremy Doku. Like, anything can happen with this Manchester City side. They're a team without so many injuries. They only have 2, Mateo Kovacic and Rodri. Those are the ones struggling through injury. While in sharp contrast, Liverpool have Alexander Isak out, Jeremy Frimpong out, Alson Ramsey-Becker out. This one is possibly set to return after the international break. Giovanni Leoni out for literally for the remainder of the season with that cruciate ligament injury, and then Stefan Bajetic. Those are some of the players that are out through injury for Liverpool. Of course, for Liverpool, Alson Ramsey-Becker is a starter, Alexander Isak will be a starter, and so would Jeremy Frimpong in a fully fit Liverpool side, if that were to be the case. So you can see that what they miss far does preponderate whatever Manchester City have on cards in terms of missing. Nonetheless, I would still contend that both teams are capable of putting, of setting up a very, very strong team. If you're Manchester City, how do you set up against this Liverpool side? First and foremost, excuse me. First and foremost, you'd have Gianluigi Donnarumma in goal. You'd go with Matheus Nunes at right back. You'd go with Ryan Atonori. I know he's just returned from injury, but he did feature in that game against Borussia Dortmund. He came on as a substitute. I'd go with Ruben Diaz at centre back. I'd go with Joshko Gvardiol. Nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised if it is John Stones alongside Ruben Diaz in that centre back pairing, and then Joshko Gvardiol in that team as well. Either at left back or right back, whichever way he chooses to play him. Then the midfield, Nico Gonzalez, Tijan Reinders, I'll go with Phil Foden. I mean, I struggle to find space for Bernardo Silva, for Ryan Atonori. They're all good. These are brilliant players that should be starting games. But given how good Phil Foden was in midweek, I do not want to put him on the bench. Tijan Reinders was equally good, and so was Nico Gonzalez. So why change it? Then up front, that's where I'll look to, tinker things. Of course, but Erling Haaland gets to start. Jeremy Doku, should he start? I think I would find a way to start Omar Mamouche on one of the wings. That's the right wing, and Jeremy Doku to the left wing. That's how I would expect, Man City to set up. And then on the side of Liverpool, Georgi Mamadashvili, Conor Bradley had a brilliant game against Real Madrid, 1v1 versus Vinicius Jr. He stood tall and won every battle, every duel there was to win. Ibrahim Konate had a wonderful game, and so did Virgil van Dijk against Real Madrid. Left back, Andy Robertson will be the guy for me, even if you have Milos Kakes 1000% fit. I'd still go for Andy Robertson. Midfield, Gravenberch, McAllister, who had a brilliant game, scored against Real Madrid. The only goal that turned out to be the match winner was his. Then Szoboszlai, brilliant performance as well for him on the night. And then I'd have Hugo Ekitike lead the lines. I'd have Mo Salah. I'd give Florian Wirtz. The reason as why I'm choosing Florian Wirtz over Cody Gakpo has nothing to do with their effectiveness, but it has everything to do with providing momentum, with everything to do with helping Florian Wirtz continue to grow in confidence. Why? Because I thought he had a fairly good game against Real Madrid. Of course, it did not have the kind of impact that you would have loved to have in an industrious young number 10 like him. It did not have that sort of impact. It wasn't that kind of performance. But I thought there were so many positives that you could pick out of his performance on the day. And for you to keep that up, you just need to give him game time. If it doesn't work out in the opening half, then you can take him off and give Cody Gakpo minutes. That's how I would set up. Midfield battle, who wins it? Manchester City at home, they're going to have the home advantage. They're not going to be as poor as they were last season. In any case, for many of the teams that beat up against Pep Guardiola last season, if he thinks you're better than him, he will set up with a bit of a mid-block, to try and frustrate you. Then, if he thinks he's better than you, he's just going to go all out and venture on the attack, just like he did against Bournemouth. The problem with Bournemouth is that they tried to play with a very, very high line, and Manchester City broke that high line on many, many occasions. But Erling Haaland should have had a hat-trick in that game in as early as the first half, but at least got a brace. And that was because Ryan Cherki found him quite quickly, and he went, those guys couldn't just keep up with him. He was just so brilliant. So, who edges the midfield? I believe it's a 50-50. It will be there for the taking. Whoever gives it more energy will take it. Ryan Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai are capable of winning that midfield battle. And as is the case with Nico Gonzalez, Tijani Reinders, and Phil Foden. And make no mistake, should Pep Guardiola feel less confident about that midfield trio, he wouldn't hesitate to fit in Bernardo Silva, push Phil Foden to the right wing, and omit Omar Mamouche. And then he plays like that. He's really, really capable of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that were to be the setup, And whichever the setup is for Manchester City, they equally have the equal chances of winning that midfield battle, They just need to give it a good go, and it will be theirs for the taking. Then we've seen that Ibrahim Konate can be vulnerable. We've seen that Virgil van Dijk can be a bit slow. We've seen that if you give it the effort it deserves, you can't frustrate Conor Bradley and force him to make some costly mistakes, including conceding an early yellow card, which is very, very possible. And if things do not change, maybe even get a red card. That vulnerability is there. For Manchester City, one of their biggest vulnerabilities is down the right. It's a kind of position where whichever player is played there can get it right as much as they can get it wrong on a given day. So you have that. So if you Liverpool look to exploit that, then I do not think it's going to be a game where set pieces will be an issue. It depends on the kind of line, low block, mid block. I think they will play each other with a lot of respect. Not because Pep Guardiola is afraid of Arne Slot, but because he is afraid of Liverpool, if that makes sense to you. When he played Jurgen Klopp, regardless of whatever teams Jurgen Klopp set up, Guardiola was afraid of Jurgen Klopp because he knew how well drilled his side was. He knew that whichever team he fielded was capable of beating up against him. This time around, he's concerned less about the manager or fears less manager, but the players that he has and their capabilities, and that will matter much on Sunday's game. So, and on that note, therefore, can Mo Salah wake up before the international break? He tried to grow into that Real Madrid game, had an okay performance, but it wasn't Mo Salah-like. In any case, we are here to see Mo Salah. We're used to his very, very high standards, as far as the Premier League is concerned, that anything half that looks as an underperformance. We know he scored a couple of goals against Bournemouth, against Burnley, against Aston Villa. He scored a couple of goals. But you can't help it feel we are here to see the Mo Salah. Of course, the star fight syndrome is going to continue with this Liverpool side. I did fear for them. But also they've shown us that they're capable of keeping a clean sheet, even against the most top sides, against Real Madrid, against a very good Aston Villa, because Morgan Rogers gave them a lot of trouble in that attacking midfield, area. But they still managed to keep a clean sheet. So, and yet looking into, and then the other factor is going to be the result that Arsenal can pick against, Sunderland, because by the time we get to watch this game on Super Sunday, Arsenal will have already played against Sunderland. If Arsenal win, that means they will be 10 points ahead of the third placed Liverpool and 9 points ahead of a second placed Manchester City. If the game ends in a draw, that means it will be 9 and 8 points respectively in terms of Man City, Liverpool, that Arsenal will be ahead of them with. So that context in itself, they know that the last thing they want is to allow Arsenal build a gap so big in this title race. It's still wide open. People have gone on to say Arsenal favorites. They've said it, this and that, everything, call it, whichever you want to believe. Whether you also look at Arsenal's favorites, whether you do not think they will win it, whether you think Man City will come back and snatch it the way they did in the 2022-2023 campaign and the season subsequent to that, 2023-2024, snatching it out of Arsenal's hands, that all remains to be seen. Whether you think Liverpool are very much still in it, despite their 4 losses already to their name this season, that's all there for the taking. The reason as to why I say that the title pursuit is still wide open is because mathematically all teams in the Premier League can still win it. Nonetheless, when you take away the mathematics of all teams being capable of winning it, when you look at the title credentials of Manchester City, those cannot be questioned. I was saying the other day, they have a very, very broad squad, a squad rich with quality. Goalkeepers, Gianluigi Donnarumma, James Trafford, Marcus Bettinelli. Defenders, John Stones, Ruben Diaz, Nathan Ake, Joshko Vardiol, Nico O'Reilly, Matas Nunes, he's a midfielder but predominantly played there. Kushanov, come to that midfield. Lodri in absentia. Of course, he will eventually return from injury. Nico Gonzalez, Bernardo Silva, Tijani Reinders, Mateo Kovacic, of course, he will eventually return from injury. Ryan Cheki, Phil Foden, Omar Mamouche, Jeremy Doku, Oscar Bob, Rico Lewis. I mean, Brad Erling Haaland. That squad is good enough to challenge for a Premier League title. All they need are 2 things. 1, to stay injury-free. 2, consistency. Injury-free, consistency. And perhaps rely less on Brad Erling Haaland. But there's no problem over relying on Brad Erling Haaland for as long as he continues to deliver. Going by the trajectory that we are on, he already has 13 Premier League goals to his name in 10 Premier League games. If he can average 13 goals in every 10 games, that means he's going to score more than 33 goals. This season. That's what it implies, you know? So then you go to Liverpool. Liverpool, despite losing 4 games on the spin, before their victory against Aston Villa, we know what their capabilities are. In any case, they are the reigning champions of the Premier League. The crown is still theirs until somebody else dethrones them. So whether you sit in your, comfortable chair as an Arsenal fan thinking, oh, we're going to win this, well, it's still a very long season. And here's one thing, the example I'd want to borrow. I've been part of the debates where people are great that winning the Premier League was more difficult than winning the UEFA Champions League. And the reason for that is the Premier League is a marathon. You have to prove yourself over 38 games. Whereas for the UEFA Champions League, you have to prove yourself in a run of games that are not even half of the entirety of the season of the Premier League. Before the new UEFA Champions League format, you played a maximum of what? 13 games to win it. In the new format, you play the 8. If you finish within the top 8, you play another 6. That's how many? 14. And then the final, so it would be 17. If you do not make it in the top 8, and go the PSG route like they did last season, you play a total of 19 games. That's the only way you make it half of what games you need to play in the Premier League to be able to win it. So that in itself makes it difficult. That's what makes it difficult to win leagues. And it's not only a monopoly of difficulty to win the Premier League. It's the same thing that applies across major leagues. Go to the Spanish La Liga, you need to be consistent over 38 games. Go to the Italian Serie A, same case. Go to the German Bundesliga, you need to be consistent over what, 34 games? You know? So go to the French League One, same case, you know? You need to prove yourself over a period of time. So while Arsenal may have the feel-good factor, they may have won 5 in a row, 10 in a row, I think, across all competitions, 8 without conceding, whatever the case is, they will know. If anybody knows, it should be Arsenal, the threat that Manchester City are in a Premier League title race. That you can't be 8 points ahead of them, you can't be 10 points ahead of them. But if you are not consistent, they'll be there to grab the opportunity. If you cannot keep up the pressure, they'll be up there to grab the opportunity, as they did in 2023, as they did in 2024. So, and over the years, they've mastered the art of finishing the Premier League season really, really well. So, Arsenal will be well aware of that. So that's why I say that the title race is still open. For example, even when you go back to last season, in the last 5 games of the season, Manchester City had one of the best forms. I think only Brighton had the equivalent of their kind of form in the last 5 games of the season. They won 4 and drew 1. Same applied to Brighton. Arsenal drew 2, lost 1, and won 2. Liverpool lost 2, drew 2, and won 1. So, when it comes to the last bend of a Premier League season, and for Manchester City, this can begin as early as 16 games, as early as 14 games to go. We've seen them go and win 16 games consecutively. We've seen them win 14 games consecutively just to wrap up a season and win the Premier League title. They've done that time and time again. Now, Arsenal will need to go back and draw inspiration from their 2023-2024 season, when after that halfway season mark, they only lost 1 game. And I'm not saying they should lose another game. No, that's not what I'm saying. But they need to go back to that sort of season and draw inspiration from that kind of season and say, how do we go on that kind of run again? Because, let's say, if in the next 19 games, which would take the season tally to 29 games, they can only lose 1 game without drawing. Do you know what that would mean? It means that by the time we enter match day 30, they would have only lost 2 games. And they would have only drawn 1 game. So do the math. How many points would they have collected? 3 times 18 is what? Do the quick math. My mental work eludes me there, you know? So, that's what sometimes it takes to win a league, you know? What do you think about Arsenal versus Sunderland? So, like I said, to wrap this one out, hi, Danny. Good to have you on the broadcast. Hope you're doing okay, Danny. Danny, you have a similar display picture like that of Peter Parker. I hope I won. Anyways, let's get to the Arsenal game in just a bit. So, for me, Liverpool, Manchester City, I'm going for a 1-1 draw. That's my prediction. I do not know if that's my objective view, as well as it is my wishful result as well. So, a 1-1 draw is what I'm going for. I'm Peter Parker. Yes, and see, Correct. I've not forgotten. Anyways, so now that Peter has asked Sunderland versus Arsenal, it's a game that we did digest in the morning, but for purposes that he wasn't here in the morning, we'll review it as well. Again, Arsenal are in the best form of their lives. It's the first time in 122 years that they've not conceded a goal in 8 games. The last time that happened was 1903. In 1903, it was 3 years after the Uganda Agreement had been signed. In 1903, it was probably about 9 years after the missionaries had arrived in Uganda to spread the gospel, because they arrived, I think, in 1894, the Anglican missionaries, So that's how far back that record stems, They've won 8 consecutive games without conceding a goal. They've won in the UEFA Champions League. They are yet to concede a goal in that. Won 4 games. In the Premier League, they've won the last 5. No goals conceded. 0. Now, they're going to come up against a difficult Sunderland side, because Sunderland is one of those bogey sides. If you had just started watching the Premier League or supporting the Premier League, and somebody told you that Sunderland are a newly promoted side from the Championship, you would hardly believe it. And even their own promotion, they weren't the most ideal candidates. Most people thought that Sheffield United were more prepared to be promoted than Sunderland were. But whatever you may think of them, they went in the transfer market and did the right things. They signed the right players. They looked at experience. They looked at physicality. They looked at industriousness. They have a very they have a very young manager in Lee Brice Regis. For me, he's one of the surprise packages of the season. When you look at their team setup, the experience of Granit Xhaka as team captain, signed from Bayer Leverkusen. Now, time and again, and I remember mentioning this during the course of the summer when that transfer went through, that time and again, we've been told that players would prefer to join a team in the UEFA Champions League than one that is not. Well, he left a team that was in the UEFA Champions League and came to a team that had been newly promoted to the Premier League. He left Arsenal 3 years ago, went to the Bundesliga, won a Bundesliga title and the DFB Pokal, and returned to captain Sunderland, a team that has Sadiq in that midfield, Reynold Mandava, Hume. Now, in setup, they tend to play with the back 5, which morphs into a 3-4-3 kind of team when they go into the offense. Bro, I heard somewhere that Lewandowski gonna be replaced by Harry Kane. Is it true? I would find the rumor very far-fetched. It's not impossible, but I would find the rumor very far-fetched. So, you look at that forward line of Sunderland. Isido, Traore, I'm forgetting his other name. Traore, very, very capable guy. Leafy, Sunderland are very physical. They're a very boggy side. They're good with set pieces. They can leverage on that to beat you. They too look for the long throw-ins to try and create all that chaos that you want to have in the box. But that physicality, the leadership of Granit Xhaka has taken them so far. Present day, if we sat and looked at all the players that were signed in the summer, I think if he won the signing of the summer, many of us would not argue to the contrary. Why? Because he has been an impact signing so far. Of course, it's still a long way to go in the season. But if they were to go with this kind of trajectory, European football is on the cards for them. They are the dark horses of the Premier League. As we speak, they are fourth on the Premier League table. You know, sorry, they are. Apologies. Yes, I think they are fourth on the Premier League table with 18 points. Bournemouth just below them on a similar number of points, as is the team above them, Liverpool, 18 points. In what world did you and I think that after 10 games in a season, Sunderland, a newly promoted side, would be within the top four, and that Tottenham Hotspurs wouldn't be, that Chelsea wouldn't be, that Man United wouldn't be, later on Aston Villa wouldn't be, later on Newcastle wouldn't be, you know? So, already you can see that Arsenal will come into this game knowing how serious it is going to be a battle, how big a battle they have, how big a mountain is there for them to climb at the Stadium of Light. You know, because it's going to be an away game for Arsenal. The Stadium of Light, by measure of surface area, is one of the biggest stadiums that there is. They're playing tough. You know, I was learning the other day, traditionally, ordinarily, I thought football pitches were standard, 100 meters by 50, period. Well, not necessarily. Some are 102 meters in length, and there could be 54, there could be 56 in width, around those figures, you know? So you choose. Other teams have smaller surface areas as compared to those, but there's this big. So what you should expect in that game is physicality. You should expect set pieces to be a factor in that game. You should expect counter-attacking football to be a factor in that game, you know, because even Sunderland will know the kind of threat that Arsenal possess. Can they contain that threat? They've shown that they are capable. They went to Chelsea and beat up against Chelsea by 2-1. They've beaten up against Nottingham Forest away from home, regardless of what you may think of Nottingham Forest. But that was a huge win for them. They lost to Manchester United, and if I were Arsenal, I'd go and watch all the reviews or the replays of that game and see how Man United were able to beat them by 2-0, because I thought Man United were really, really good on the day. So Arsenal will look to neutralize, one, the counter-attacking threat, the set-piece threat that they could face, the physicality. Now, the advantage with Arsenal is that they are capable of matching the physicality of any Premier League opponent. When it comes to set pieces, they are as good as defending them as they are at leveraging them to score. Then, when it comes to counter-attacking football, I think that's where Arsenal are not as good as a good number of other teams in the Premier League. They need to be much quicker on the transition. However, I do not blame them for failing to be much quicker on the transition, because why? Oftentimes, they are playing teams that play with low blocks and mid blocks. So such teams do not even give you the leverage of a counter-attack. It only happened against Burnley, and they were able to nail that. They nailed that. You know, that second goal, for those of you that remember, a resultant free kick, you have, what's his name? Kyle Walker go over to the left side to make this ball in. Ball is one back, and on they go to race. And Victor Gyökeres is leading that, I think, down to on the right-hand side. Makes the diagonal pass to find Leandro Trossard, and you know, that's how they go on to score. Of course, Leandro Trossard does what Leandro Trossard does, makes the cross, Declan Rice scores. You know, so that's the one key moment or the one scenario that you remember Arsenal playing that kind of transition, that kind of counter-attack football. So they do not have much. They have it in their armor that they can leverage on it. It just doesn't happen very often because of how teams set up against them. You know, so it's something to really, really think about or to ponder about for Sunderland. When you go in set pieces, you could be caught up if you overcommit, as Burnley overcommitted and they got punished. And then once Arsenal score, they're going to make it even more difficult for you to create chances and later on score against them. Now, my own prediction for that game has been a 2-1 victory for Arsenal. I do not know, but I keep having this snaring feeling that soon rather than later, they're going to concede a goal. Not that they're going to lose against Sunderland, which is actually also possible, but that they will eventually going to concede a goal. Can they set a new record of 9 consecutive games without conceding? It is also on the cards. Like I said in the preview in the morning, that it may not be a priority for Arsenal, but they will have it at the back of their mind going throughout the entirety of this season, that one of the records, the longest records in Premier League football that you have to go back to find in 2005 is held by Chelsea, because they conceded only 15 goals in that season. Only 15 in 38 games. So that tells you how decent that Chelsea side were. I think you had William Gallas at left back, you had John Terry Carvalho, you had Renato Paulo Ferreira, very, very decent side. Makelele, Lampard, Joe Cole, name it. Then the subsequent season, they conceded only 22 goals, 7 in addition to what they had conceded the previous season. They still won the Premier League title. Chelsea. So, and again, you will see it at every end of the game where they have been able to keep a clean sheet. You see it with the celebrations between the... Of course, the cause for their good record with not conceding has nothing to do with the entirety of the team, how they apply themselves, how they defend, which begins with the press, what happens in midfield, and thereafter if those two layers have been penetrated. But that defense will fight for that, knowing that another clean sheet is going to be just as important, because there's a record to pursue. So they're going to be a hard team to beat. I still expect Arsenal to win. Nonetheless, I expect Arsenal to concede, because I just have that snaring feeling that Sunderland is going to be a little too difficult, for them, as have been other games, but that Sunderland could find a way, But hell, they failed to score against Manchester United. And it's not like Manchester United have the best of defenses in as far as the Premier League is concerned. In any case, the Premier League defensive record is one of the worst that there is. In the top 10, 17 goals scored, 16 goals conceded. Goal difference of 1. In fact, they are the only team in the top 10 to have conceded more than 15 goals this season. And then, in the bottom half of the table, you'll find a good number of teams that have not even conceded as much as Man United have conceded. In fact, the teams that you'll find that have conceded more goals than Man United this season are 1, Leeds United with 17, Burnley with 19, West Ham 21, 19 for Nottingham Forest, and 22 for Wolverhampton Wanderers. That's 16th place and below. All the other teams have a better defensive record in terms of goal conceded compared to Manchester United. So if Man United was able to keep a clean sheet against Sunderland, what makes you think Arsenal can't keep one? Anything is possible. But I just have that snaring feeling, that ill feeling, that they could concede. So that's my preview for Arsenal versus Sunderland for you, Peter Parker. But on the side of Arsenal, just to give you the impressions of what should be expected in as far as the starting 11 is concerned. Of course, they have the news that Gabriel Jesus is back, but do not expect him on the turf in an Arsenal shirt very soon. They will look to ease him in, even with all the injuries they continue to suffer with. In fact, reports say that they could delay him until the end of December or until January. But we know sometimes players push for this. If he suffers no setback, brilliant. He suffered horrible knee injuries to his left knee, his right knee, and It's taken him 10 months. Got injured in January. He's back after October in terms of full training. So, but David Ryan goal, William Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, Urian Timber, Ricardo Carafiori. That's the expectation of the back four. Midfield, Martin Zubimendi is expected to return alongside Declan Rice, Ebelechi Eze. And ahead of them, Mikel Merino, Leandro Trossard, and Bukayo Saka. That's the team to expect. That's the team to expect, you know. So, do let me know what your thoughts will be on that game as well. Then, quickly, as we look to wrap this one up, perhaps, I'm just thinking that we get to look through the other games tomorrow. Aston Villa versus Bournemouth, we'll preview in the morning. Brentford, Newcastle tomorrow. Crystal Palace, Brighton tomorrow. Nottingham Forest, Leeds. We'll look at those more deeply tomorrow. But for now, let's take a look at what will be coming your way from elsewhere in Europe in as far as the respective top 5 leagues are concerned. In the Spanish La Liga on Saturday, Girona will be up against Deportivo Alaves. Sevilla will be up against Osasuna. Atletico de Madrid will be up against Levante, while Espanyol will take on Villarreal at 11 p.m. The game against Atletico Madrid will come at the same kickoff time as the Arsenal game at 8:30 p.m. While Sevilla against Osasuna will come at 6:15 p.m. And then Girona up against Deportivo Alaves will come at 4 p.m. In the German Bundesliga, Bayer Leverkusen, following their 1-0 victory against Benfica in the UEFA Champions League, will be back at home against Heidenheim. Hamburg SV, where Arsenal's Fabio Vieira has so far conceded 2 red cards, will be up at home against Borussia Dortmund. Then Hoffenheim will take on RB Leipzig. Union Berlin will be up against Bayern Munich in that, a very, very fierce battle at 5:30 p.m. And then Borussia Mönchengladbach will take on FC Cologne there at 8:30 p.m. In the Italian Serie A, Como will take on Cagliari. Lecce will be up against Hellas Verona at the same kickoff time. Juventus will be at home against Torino. Juventus on the back of a disappointing 1 draw against, I think, Sporting CP in the UEFA Champions League. While Parma at 10:45 p.m. will be up against AC Milan. In the French League 1, there will be some games. Olympique Marseille against Brest. Olympique Marseille being very, very inconsistent. They did lose to Atlanta in the UEFA Champions League by a 1-0 in midweek. Le Havre will be up against Nantes. AC Monaco will take on Lens. And then let's see what Super has to offer, because all the leagues, all the top 5 leagues in Europe will, have their last games played on Sunday before players go away for the international break. In the Spanish La Liga, Athletic Bilbao at 4 p.m. will be up against Real Oviedo. At 6:15 p.m., Rayo Vallecano will take on Real Madrid. That's on Super Sunday. And then Mallorca will be up against Getafe. Valencia will be up against Real Betis. Both games kicking off at 8:30 p.m. And then in the late kickoff at 11 p.m., Celta Vigo will entertain Barcelona. Celta Vigo did win their game in the UEFA Europa League on Thursday. Then in the German Bundesliga, Freiburg will be up against St. Pauli. VfB Stuttgart will take on Augsburg. Eintracht Frankfurt will be up against Mainz. And then in the Italian Serie A, Atlanta will be up against Sassuolo. Bologna will take on Napoli. Napoli on the back of a goalless draw there in the UEFA Champions League. Disappointingly so, by the way. Then Genoa will be up against Fiorentina. AC Roma on the back of a victory, I think a 2-0 victory or 3-1 against Rangers in the UEFA Europa League, will be at home against Udinese. There, Gianpiero Gasperini already doing well with AC Roma. Then Inter Milan will be up against Lazio there in. By the way, that's a game to watch. And I think when we're done with the Manchester City game, with Manchester City versus Liverpool, we should all be running to watch the game between Inter Milan and Lazio. Then in the French League 1, you'll have Lorient against Toulouse. Angers will take on Auxerre. Metz will be up against Nice. Strasbourg will be up against Lille, while Olympique Lyon will entertain Paris Saint-Germain. Paris Saint-Germain on the backdrop of a 2-1 loss against Bayern Munich in the UEFA Champions League. Lyon, last I checked, I think they equally lost their midweek game. So do not have so much high hopes in them, but it's a fierce game in as far as the French League 1 is concerned. So Then we know, like I told you, was it yesterday or in the morning? Ajax are in the search for a new manager. They are speaking to their former manager in Erik ten Hag. We spoke about this last night. They're having conversations with him over a possible return to replace John Heitinga after he was sacked. Rob Edwards at Middlesbrough is targeted by Wolverhampton Wanderers. They look at him as the ideal candidate to help them survive relegation. 10 games, 8 lost, only 2 draws. Last season, they lost, I think, the opening 7 games and lost 7. So last season in itself wasn't equally as good for Wolverhampton Wanderers, and that's why they sacked Gary O'Neill and brought in Vitor Pereira, for whom after a month after extending his contract until June 2028, he got the sacking. He got the sacking. I'm just trying to see if we can see how many games after match week 10, how things stood in as far as Wolverhampton Wanderers were concerned. They were bottom of the league, 0 wins, 3 draws, 7 losses. So it's a repeat of what happened last season, only that this season is just slightly worse than it was last season. So at this point in the season, last season, Liverpool were at the summit of the Premier League table with 8 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss with 25 points. Exactly how things look for Arsenal this season. Arsenal, at the same point in the season, were 5th with 5 wins, 3 draws and 2 losses already to their name with 18 points. Guess what? Liverpool have 18 points. Only that they are third. They have won 5. They have won 6. They've lost 4. That's the difference. Manchester City at this stage last season, after 10 games, had 23 points, 7 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. This season, after 10 games, they have 19 points. They have about 3 losses, and they have, I think, 7 wins. They have about 3 losses, a draw against Arsenal. I do not remember any other draw. So 6 wins, 1 draw and 3 losses. That's the tally of Manchester City in this season compared to last season. So that's where things stand. And like I said, it's going to take a lot of consistency for any team that wants to win the Premier League title this season. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. I thank you so much, LFC. Thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Peter Parker, and every single one of you that tuned into tonight's podcast. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for being patient with us to be there all the way as we brought you the preview for Super Sunday, particularly for that game between Liverpool and Manchester City. Liverpool are going to be away from home. Yes, they won at the Etihad last season. Do you think they can do it again? They are capable of doing it just as much as Manchester City is capable of beating them. You have to go back to around March 2023 or April thereabout for the last time Manchester City beat up against Liverpool at the Etihad Stadium. But it does promise to be a very, very entertaining fixture, a scintillating fixture. But both sides will play each other with a lot of respect. During that time in April 2023, Manchester City won the game by 4 goals to 1. In case you care to remember, the goal scorers from that game was Mo Salah for Manchester City in the 17th minute, but then goals from Julian Alvarez, Kevin De Bruyne, Ilkay Gundogan and Jack Grealish were enough to ensure that Manchester City walked away with all 3 points. Mo Salah is one of those usual suspects that oftentimes scores against Manchester City. So for those of you that need to readjust your fantasy Premier League teams, go look at them before the time closes. Make the adjustments or the changes that you think you ought to make in as far as everything is concerned, and have a winning weekend of the fantasy Premier League. So Salah, yeah, one of those that oftentimes scores against Manchester City, against teams like Man United, you know, that sort of, thing. Anyways, it's been 1 hour of doing this. Allow me wrap it here, and I wish you a blessed weekend. Like I said, tomorrow we'll be back at around 11 a.m. That's the time we will be looking to do that. That means it will be around 8 a.m. UK time. So our UK audience, our European audience, from Spain, from Turkey, from no Turkey. Turkey usually we are within the same time zone. But UK, Ireland, Scotland, Spain, yes, that will be the time. Have yourselves a blessed night, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye for now.